Welcome to episode 9 of the Stoke Event podcast. Thanks for giving up your time wherever you are to listen in. My guest today is FBU Executive Council member for Region 5, Andrew Fox-Hewitt. Andy is a man that for many needs no introduction, but for those who are not familiar with him, Andy's been in the Fire and Rescue Service for 25 years. He's been a union official for most of that time, having held several positions from branch official to regional official, and currently sits on the Executive Council representing members in the North West. We discuss Andy's decision to run for President of the Fire Brigades Union, what his priorities will be if elected, and how he plans to deliver on his pledges. I'd like to take this chance to urge you to nominate and vote for Andy for FBU President, as after listening to this episode, I don't think you'll need convincing. Anyway, here we go with episode 9. Right, now then, Andy, I've got with me Andrew Fox-Hewitt, who is currently the EC member for the North West Region 5, and he is currently running for FBU President. So I'll hand over to Andy, and I will get him to introduce himself. Take it away, Andy.
Thank you for hosting me on your podcast today, James. Yes, for those that don't know me, I am Andrew Fox-Hewitt. I am, as James says, the EC member for the Fire Brigades Union for the North West region. I've been in the fire service 24 and a half years. I joined age 19 as a retained firefighter in Staffordshire, and I was a rep during my time as a retained firefighter. And then after a few years, I joined the wholetime service across the border in the northwest of Cheshire.
Cracking. So you've been an FBU official for, I think, most of your time in the fire service, haven't you? So what different roles have you held within the union then, and what different roles have led you to this point in your career as an FBU official?
Sure. So I come from a family of miners from the northeast. That's my family heritage. They were from Durham and Washington. They came down to Stoke-on-Trent when the pits started to close in the northeast. So I've always had that kind of exposure to trade union movement and politics. Yeah, I joined the fire service at 19. I was a brigade retained rep and an acting regional representative for the retained in the West Midlands. And then when I joined the whole-time service in Cheshire, I think within 18 months of joining and being out of probation, I became the branch rep at Crewe Fire Station, where I spent the majority of my operational career. And then from there, I was a vice chair of the brigade committee, and then I was the brigade secretary for Cheshire for approaching a decade. And then I was also, concurrent to that, for 5-6 years, I was the regional treasurer for the North West, and then regional secretary, and then onto the Executive Council a couple of years ago.
So it's quite definitely a colourful career so far as an FBU official. I didn't know you came from mining stock. I do as well. So that's something else we've got in common. My great-granddad was a Welsh miner before they came over to Yorkshire. So yeah, it's something else we've got in common, and definitely something that I feel ties me to the trade union movement as well. I do feel it's in my roots as well, much like yourself. So I know you've worked for different fire and rescue services, haven't you? And you've worked different duty systems. So how do you think that has informed your approach to being a union official? And you've obviously got quite a good understanding of the different duty systems and different backgrounds that firefighters come from.
Yeah, broadly, I think the issues are the same. It's about looking after people, making sure that they're safe, looking after the fact that they've got the right equipment, the right number of people to do the jobs, and that we are paid for the risks that we take and the sacrifices we make as firefighters. And then you obviously break that down into the duty systems. Retained and whole-time are two very, very different things. Retained firefighters give up a huge proportion of their lives and their working week often around very diverse primary employment types, and they're then tied to the alerter for, up to 120 hours a week, and that'll say it's a huge commitment. It wasn't until I ceased doing that I realised how much sacrifice you give away from family and meal times and birthdays and Christmases. Anything can be interrupted. And as a whole-time firefighter, I worked the 224 shift system, and with it, nighttime working. But firefighters are firefighter. We're all exposed to the same risks. I believe that it's only the hours of work that vary and that are different. But I think there is, and there has been broadly, a lack of understanding, particularly on the demands for part-time firefighters in the sector. And I think that speaks to the fact that it's probably in a bit of a crisis point at the minute. I think when that system was designed after the war and the amalgamation of the National Fire Service into local authorities, it was a very different world, wasn't it? People had employment close to their towns and villages. Now you have to commute for work much greater distances. There isn't the community buy-in from most or a lot of employers to release staff for the greater public good of retained firefighting. And then on the other side, whole-time firefighters, they are tied to the workplace for long periods of time, out on incidents, often without reliefs. They have to go through the health implications that are often in the background from nighttime working that I think the sector doesn't pay enough attention to.
Yeah, do you know what? I absolutely agree. And I was retained before I was whole-time, and I think I've said exactly the same. You don't realise what a massive commitment it is until you actually step away from it and you think, wow, I actually can't believe what I was giving to that and how long I gave that for. Yeah, and the nighttime working, I've said similar things. There's so many pillars that stack up against us in this job, and shift work in itself is a carcinogen, and it leaves us vulnerable to all the other things that kind of confront us and have the potential to cause as an issue. So it sounds like that is the health and safety of firefighters is a priority for you. And I know you've been a health and safety rep in the past, haven't you? So yeah. I imagine that is a big priority for you as well.
Yeah, well, like you say, the medical research is there, and it's developed a lot more, particularly around the globe. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they put a lot more focus. Germany, Scandinavia in particular, put a lot of focus on cancers and heart disease and issues with blood. We don't really tend to focus on that in this country, and I think that's a travesty because we can all see the increasing incidents that firefighters go to and the impact it has on shortening the lives of firefighters. They are way below the average mortality rates across normal working population. And I do think that it's absolutely about time that that's recognised and that things are put in place to protect firefighters, screen firefighters better, continual monitoring through careers and aftercare when you've left the fire service.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll just say to everyone, having worked with Andy, I know that he will put his money where his mouth is, and if he says that is a priority for him, it will be a priority. So hopefully, you can build on the work that's already going on with the FBU and really sort of spearhead that in the direction it needs to go in. Why don't you also give us a bit of a rundown of the main duties and responsibilities of the FBU president? Because I know I've certainly had questions. What does a president actually do? And there's probably people listening to this that probably don't even know what the role of the president actually is in the union.
Yeah, and I think it's an absolute valid question because I think most people know what a branch rep is or a brigade official and a regional official. But after that, people maybe don't know what work goes on and what the workloads are. The president is very niche. It's the constitutional head and principal chair of the union's democratic structures. And it's really important that people understand that you have the General Secretary, the Assistant General Secretary, the national officers. They leave the fire service and go into the employment of the Fire Brigades Union. So that becomes their employer and they sever the link of their employment. The rest of the officials, whether that's branch, brigade, regional, executive council members, they don't. They are all still employed by their fire and rescue service. They're still paid and pensioned by the services. The president is the highest lay official that represents members. And I think that's one of the things that I'm keen to stress on how I maybe differentiate from others. I see the president's role a little bit differently than other people. And my view of it is it's ultimately there to the things that people will know that the president does is chairs annual conference where our members and reps come together and decide the policy making for the fire and rescue service through the FBU. The president chairs meetings of the executive council and provides leadership and culture around how decisions are made and how the union is governed. But moreover, it's about overseeing the implementation and policies of what members have said. I view it as a link between members on the ground, on fire stations and branches and control rooms and training centres and head office. It's not there to represent head office of the union. It's the other way round. It's to represent members to ensure that what they are saying, what they are demanding, what they are deciding through the various structures of the union is implemented to members' satisfaction. And that's the kind of president that I want to be.
Pretty important role then, to be honest. You could even say it's the engine room or even the heart of the FBU, really, and you are going to be right at the centre of members, decisions and ambitions and hopefully making sure that, we're all represented as best as we can be. I know there's a lot of different opinions and viewpoints in the FBU and amongst members, and I guess it's just striking a balance, really, isn't it? And just trying to represent everybody in the best way and with the best intentions, really.
Yeah, and I think another important factor that I probably didn't cover in my introduction is I spent just short of a decade as an elected councillor in local government. I was a deputy leader, and at principle, I'm a Democrat. So I believe, if someone's electing you to represent their views, you have to know what they say, what they do, how they take part in decision making, and how they vote on your behalf. Councillors do that. It's webcast. It's recorded. Votes are recorded. MPs do that. We don't do that on the Executive Council. And I've said for quite some time, and I'm saying it now, I'm running for president, that I want to change that. I think trade unions should be member led. It's members who own the trade union and decide the policies of the trade union. And I think that decisions that are taken on behalf of members, whether that's governance, whether that's money, whether that's strategy, members should know how those people that are representing them have voted, what questions they've asked, how they've come to that decision making around governance and scrutiny. Otherwise, if you can't hold elected representatives to account, it's not really a democratic structure. So I've lived most of my life in the public eye and being able to be transparent and held accountable, and I don't see why that should be any different for the Fire Brigades Union, to be honest, James. Yeah,
do you know what? I think that will be well received by everyone listening. I'd be surprised if anybody's got an issue with that, and I think that is what members want to hear, and that'll be the style of leadership that they want to see. So why don't you tell us, why you're running for president, what prompted it, or what was the decision behind it, and what you think you can bring to the role, and why members should nominate and vote for you.
Sure. So, I will set out by saying I never had any preconceived aspiration to be the president. It wasn't something that I had planned to stand for or indeed wanted to stand for. It was the fact that I've been on the Executive Council for a few years now, and I am someone that is a critical friend of decision making. I'm very much into scrutiny and getting the right detail, answering the right questions to govern. And when it was announced the other month that the current president, Tia Murray, is retiring, it was a number of other Executive Council members that asked me to consider standing. As I say, at that point, I hadn't considered it. So, it's an important, time-consuming role. So I went away and spoke with my family, my wife and friends about it, and came to the decision that I believed I had the skills and the different approach that I think is needed to take the union forward. So that's why I'm standing. There are a few things I want to do differently. I think a national strike fund is a priority of mine. I've been an advocate of that for a long time, and that's I would say to listeners, a strike fund isn't to be attacked as being this idealism from the 1970s where you're out on strike all the time. I think at the minute there are, as you will know, being in the sector yourself, there's 45 as the fire and rescue services. Most of them are under pressure for cuts, reducing pumps, reducing firefighter posts, introducing new areas of work that aren't agreed. And I think when it comes to those type of things, if local firefighters go into dispute at the minute, if they say we're not having this, we're going to ballot, the employer will take a relaxed approach to that in most cases, because they know that you've got to get over ballot thresholds in terms of the trade union bill. Then you've got to get the membership up for a fight and up for taking industrial action, and then you've got to sustain that industrial action to win a dispute. I think if you look at other unions like Unite and GMB that have got strike funds in place, and they're able to supplement some of the earnings when firefighters are, or when their members are out on strike, I think it's a very different approach, and it gives you much greater industrial leverage. If you go into a dispute in Suffolk or Dorset in Wiltshire or anywhere in the country and you say, right, we're not having this, we're going to ballot our members and we will have a strike fund to sustain them, bring it on. I think that puts huge industrial leverage into the hands of the trade union. And it's something that I advocate for many years. It was agreed in 2024, but I've yet to see that fund be actioned. So that's something that I want to change to give us, like I say, greater industrial strength. Some of the other areas, as I've touched on, is transparency and accountability. I'm a big believer in that, and that's something that I think is long overdue and that members want to see. I think, again, refocusing on pay. We've just had the pay ballot in the Fire Brigades Union for this year's pay offer, 3.8%. I personally had some problems with that offer, and that's because if you look at since 2010, firefighters are now down by around £5,200 down on their wages. Had those annual pay awards kept pace with the increased cost of living through inflation, that's a huge amount of money. And I think if you look at the military the past few years, they've had rises to a greater extent than the fire service. The police have been looked after, nurses, teachers. And if you look at the BMA, for example, the British Medical Association that organise and represent junior doctors, they turned around, didn't they, 3 years ago and said, we want pay restoration. Our wages have been suppressed to such an extent that the cost of living is unacceptable for our members. And they've run a campaign and they've got, I think, around 27% increase in 3 years, huge sums of money. And so when this year's pay offer came round, again, we're focused on pay reform and pay progression in the fire sector. Now, I'm fully behind that. It's about doing things differently. But we have spoke about it for an awful long time now, probably around 11 years. And that's taking a long time to develop and then put to the members to agree. So whilst that work goes on in the background, I don't think it's acceptable year on year to see our pay eroded. I'm a firefighter. I'm paid as a firefighter. I've got a mortgage, I've got children to raise, I'd like a holiday every year. I don't think these things are beyond the realms of achievability for professional firefighters that give up 42 hours a week and take the risk that we do. Those things in life shouldn't be beyond the reach of firefighters. So I think that we need to be a lot more loud and aggressive in demanding that firefighter pay is reflective of the sacrifices that our members make doing the profession that they do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and it's really refreshing to hear you lay out your priorities in such a clear way. I think it's going to align with what a lot of people are looking for from the union. So I just wanted to ask. Obviously, you've said about the strike fund. I know that you've suggested quite an interesting and selfless method for beginning that fund. So you're not just talking about pulling it out of thin air, are you? You've got a plan on how to actually, initiate that fund.
Yeah. So obviously the Fire Brigades Union, like all trade unions, owns properties. We have offices throughout the United Kingdom for our members to meet at, and for our officials that are working on behalf of members to meet and to conduct their work. We've got a head office in London. And we've also got a property, a residential property, a flat that is used for the president. And that's based in Kingston. We've obviously moved our head office, for those that are aware, from Kingston to King's Cross, more central London. And I've said that I think that in today's age, we maybe don't need a flap for the use of the president. And I've said if I was elected as a president, I would advocate to say that's not something that I particularly see as a priority or a value for members. And I think that should be sold and the proceeds put into a general strike fund to support members engaged in industrial disputes throughout the country. That's one of the priorities. Another one is, I think we have to be open in the Fire Brigades Union. We often are critical of chief fire officers or services where they've got cultural problems. And there's been some very high-profile cultural reports done on fire and rescue services throughout the UK over the last few years. In the FBU, we've, like any organisation, we've got complaints, and it could be complaints about the representation that people have been afforded or the way that they've been treated by Fire Brigades Union members. And I think it's important that we deal with those issues. We don't take years to resolve them. I think that undermines trust and confidence in the FBU. And again, on my theme of transparency and accountability, I have a view that we need to do things differently. And I'm advocating for a two-stage process. So if a complaint is lodged to the union from a member, it's investigated, and that investigation should take 3 to 6 months, no longer than 6 months. And if someone's done something wrong or they've made a mistake, they are held accountable. And as long as you deal with people consistently and proportionately and fairly, then that's the right way to go. And if people haven't done anything wrong, they are exonerated. And we do it in a transparent manner. So in order to move that along and get rid of this backlog of complaints and the weaponizing of complaints, to be fair, I want to have a two-stage process where if a member makes a complaint, it's investigated within 6 months, a report's done to the Executive Council, and an outcome is arrived at. And if members aren't happy with that, we have a second stage appeal process independent of the FBU, conducted by another trade union panel, and they will see if the unions got it right. And I think that would restore the trust and confidence that's lacking in some quarters now around our handling of internal matters. So that's another element. And there is an ongoing cost to the union of dealing with complaints, when we get legal advice, etc. I believe that money should be much better spent in organising in areas, educating members, improving density, in hard-to-reach rural areas where they maybe don't have as much exposure to the FBU or to representation of firefighters. We can send in fixed-term employees there to help drive up engagement, education, and membership density. So, these are things that we should be concentrating on in the FBU.
Yeah, I can't really see how anyone could argue with that. I think you're doing a very good job so far of, I think, demonstrating for everyone what kind of leader you would be for the FBU. And I know you've held, leadership positions in the union at various or probably all levels of the FBU so far up to your current position. Is there anything that you want to say about or add to, for everyone, what kind of style of leadership would you bring to, as you've said, what is the highest lay official position in the FBU?
Well, I think, as I've said, I believe that the members should drive our union. Firefighters are the ones that are experiencing the issues day in, day out. They are the ones that are short-staffed. They are the ones that are stuck on incidents without reliefs. They are the ones that are struggling perhaps to get their annual leave entitlements in, to get fed and hydrated properly on incident grounds. So they should be the ones that are driving our priorities, and then it's up to elected officials like myself to go out and deliver the change that they need. In terms of my approach, as I say, I've been an elected member of local government and a deputy leader. If you can manage the arena of politics and the factionalism that exists there with very strong-minded people with very polarised views, it should be a walk in the park dealing with the internal machinations of the Fire Brigades Union. And I'm someone that wants to have debates, get rid of factionalism, get rid of voting on friendship grounds or political grounds. It should be what are we trying to achieve? What is the information we need to have that well-rounded, considered position? And then create a space where everyone has their say and is debated thoroughly, but then we need to move on to take a position. And where there are disagreements, we need to learn how to disagree without falling out. You know, that's the whole principle of building a consensus around an idea. So we'd have the debates, we get to a position, and then we go out, and whether there's some people that didn't particularly agree with that, once you've exhausted that governance process and come up with the outcome, it's up in a united front to build the unity and to go and deliver those objectives. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, creating the space for that to happen.
I think that's, it's refreshing to hear. And I think I don't really see an alternative style that would work, as well as that, to be honest. So I think that's going to go down very well with people listening. It's, I'm pleased to hear that. And I mean, having, worked with you and knowing you, I know what your style is going to be. And I think it's, it's going to be, it's what we need, to be honest. And, I think what a question I did want to ask you, which I think is on the edge of everyone's lips, is the pay reform. And what are your, I mean, I know you have mentioned it, and, we're well behind and the advantages that a strike fund would bring. But I guess specifically, what are your visions and hopes for pay reform within our sector? And do you think there is a particular way that we can achieve this, and what will that look like?
Sure. I think, I have to say from the outset that there's a lot of great officials, senior officials in our union doing a lot of great things for members. So it's certainly not to criticise the work that's been done. I think pay reform and pay progression, for those that don't know, are two strands of a body of work that we're doing. Pay reform is about saying the very flat structure that's existed in the fire and rescue service for decades, where you become competent and then there's no more room for pay increases. It's about doing things differently. So if you look at certainly like the police, the NHS and the teaching professions, there's a recognition and reward for time served, the years that you've got and the experience that brings to your teams. So pay reform is about having a pay spine. So you would join the pay spine at the bottom as a new recruit. When you've passed out and you become a development firefighter, you move up some points, and then at certain intervals of years served in your career, you would move up that pay spine. And then the second element to that is pay progression, which is about recognising that there are new or emerging areas of work in the sector that aren't currently within the firefighter role map. So whether that's response to flooding, marauding, terrorism, health, inspection work, it's about saying, well, that isn't really in the role of a firefighter. So if you want for your staff to do that, there needs to be additional reward and recognition. And then there's some crossover then between saying at the minute, the only way that you can advance your pay is by promotion. Well, promotion isn't for everybody. And it's about saying, you should be able to be a firefighter, but have some skills in fire inspection. And if you've got those, you can move beyond a top pay spine point of a firefighter and not have to get promotion to a crew manager. So it's doing things different, but taking a nod and a reflection of how other sectors are rewarding and recognising the value of their staff. So that's the ethos behind it. It has been going on for 11 years. There has been in the last 2 years, and particularly from what I've seen in the discussions that I've been involved in with the National Joint Council, there is a lot of work now gone on, and the outline design of what it looks like and how it should work is there. It's now about getting the government funding to provide the envelope to pay for that. And it's also about getting agreement on if that work's acceptable to FBU members and what value we as a trade union put on that work. That is the stuff that's ongoing, that's yet to be reaching a conclusion.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm sure, as you've said, we should be we are a member-led union. So I'm sure any work or any consultation that goes ahead and whatever it results in will be put out to members to vote on and decide whether or not, the membership think, yeah, this is a good direction, this is an acceptable direction, and this is something we want to take on ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. So the General Secretary has given a commitment, and so has the Executive Council, that if we get to the end of the process and we have an offer to change the pay rates and the structure, it will be put to the FBU members through a democratic ballot to see if that is something that they agree to sign off on.
Excellent. Yeah, good stuff. So I also want to ask, what are some of your most memorable moments as a union rep? I imagine there's quite a few proud moments you've had over your tenure as a union official.
Yeah, there's some hairy ones as well. I mean, look, I've always got a lot of satisfaction out of where we've had the unfortunate position where firefighters have been injured, especially in the line of duty, and they are no longer able to work in the fire service. Sometimes the benefits and the aftercare that they are due, or that we think they are due, isn't always provided by the employers, and we have to then go through ill health retirement processes or appeal to a board of medical referees. I've got a lot of satisfaction from representing members through those processes and getting them, the compensation or the adaptations that they need for the rest of their lives. That means a huge amount to them and their families, and I do take a lot of satisfaction from when we've had some victories in those difficult circumstances. I guess one of the most proud moments is that you will recall is in Cheshire Fire and Rescue Service when all 2 pump stations were going to be downgraded to 1 pump. That had already been approved by the fire authority. Several of those machines, those fire appliances, had already been removed, and I took over, didn't I, in 2015, and said we're not putting up with that. Why should we have less firefighters, less fire engines? Why should those communities be put at greater risk? So we launched a huge campaign to save them, and that was with quite a lot of derision by the chief fire officer at the time and the fire authority. They all said, this has been agreed years ago, it's going ahead, there's nothing you can do. And we mounted a campaign over those 18 months, and it culminated in a rally, didn't it, with about 250 members. All of the national press were there, and we saved the appliances at Crewe, Ellesmere Port, Chester, and those appliances are still there to this day, serving those communities, going to incidents, saving property and life. So, that's something that does leave me with a great sense of pride.
I do. I remember that very well, yeah. And it was a great feeling and a great sense of camaraderie around that. Yeah, that is definitely one of my standout moments in terms of my FBU track
journey.
So far, shall we say. My FBU journey, that's the word I was looking for, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so is there anything else that you want to add to the conversation, or anything that you want to say before we wrap up? Anything that we might have missed or anything like that?
No, I mean, I suppose I know that you are very passionate, James, around firefighter health. And I know that we've, through the health secretary a couple of months ago, we announced the firefighters Concordat, which was certainly a word that a lot of us had to research because we weren't sure what it was. But yeah, so the detail and implementation of that is still to be worked out. But I mean, in principle, it should be a great thing for firefighters in the sector. I think if you look at what the framework is designed to do, it's around regular checks, identifying health problems of firefighters. It's government-funded research, particular cancers and exposures to hazardous contaminants. It's greater access to NHS services. It's recording firefighters' profession on their NHS records, which is a massive step forward. And it's a focus on underrepresented groups. So I think that when we spoke earlier in the conversation around how we can do things better and differently, I know that we're very keen to have presumptive legislation in the UK that recognises firefighting as a carcinogenic profession, so that if you develop a certain number of cancers, that is recognised as an industrial disease, so that you and your family get the compensation that comes with being exposed to that, and that being the root cause of your illness. So I think this is a big step forward, and I really look forward to seeing the government map out exactly how that's going to be delivered and what funding they're going to put in to ensure it. But it's a really positive step forward for firefighters in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And, having been at the Health and Safety Summit when it was announced, it was great to hear, and I was very, very pleased to see us moving in that direction. So yeah, it's good to see after so long that it is actually starting to get the recognition that it deserves. So I always like to ask people when they come on the podcast if they've got a book and or a movie or a documentary recommendation, if you've got any of those for us.
What, just one? Pick one favourite or a couple?
One of the three or several, totally up to you, if you however you want to do it.
Sure, well, so I'm a bit of an anorak. I'm a bit of a political beast. I don't tend to read fiction whatsoever, really. Although I'll caveat that with probably my favourite book of all time, which certainly set me off on my political journey as a young man, was The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Trussell.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, to be honest. Yeah,
that is an absolutely fantastic book, and that should be number one on anyone who's in the trade union movement or indeed the left of politics. But yeah, I would recommend that to anyone. Films, well, I suppose a lot of people would say Shawshank Redemption. I think that's got a fantastic message in it.
Classic.
But I think I also like, from my mining background, I like Pride, that shows the story of the lesbians and gays against pit closures. That's a really uplifting film, and I actually showed it on a fire station where there was a lot of firefighters that were saying, what on earth are you putting this on for? But by the end of it, they were trying to conceal wiping tears from their eyes. So that was a good moment. Yeah. And I do like war stuff, so I like Where Eagles Dare. That's another favourite of mine.
Right. I've not seen that. Might have to give that a try. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, Andy. And to everyone listening, please nominate and vote for Andy Fox-Hewitt. I certainly will be. So yeah, thank you for coming on, Andy, and I will catch you soon, mate.
Thank you for having me on, and everyone who's out there listening that's working in the fire service in these balmy temperatures, do stay safe, keep hydrated, and try and protect yourselves against the contaminants from those wildfires.
Absolutely. Cheers, Andy. I will speak to you soon, mate.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.